I've talked a fair bit about life and journeys, and I guess most of us probably we've all been on holiday somewhere at some point, yeah? And that means, how many people have been abroad? Most people been abroad? We don't need it through these, Johnny, just those ones. Most people have been abroad, and so most of you have flown, right? Yeah, some of you have flown. And if you've flown, probably you either love it or hate it. Well, you may just like it, but most people, you get some people that really hate flying, right? Now, if you're someone that hates flying, then for you, the holiday begins when you vacate the aeroplane at your destination, right? Until you get off that aeroplane, it's just horrible, right? You only board the aeroplane because it's going to get you to where you're going, and then you can enjoy the rest of your holiday. Or maybe if you really like flying, like I do, then the holiday begins the moment you step onto the aeroplane. And it's like, yeah, here we go. I've only been on a couple of flights. My first flight was to Amsterdam. I remember the flight there. I don't remember the flight back. My second flight was to Jersey, and on the flight out there was a problem with the landing gear. One of the wheels had seized or something like that, so they had to leave the landing gear down the whole time for the flight so it would cool down, because that's what the brakes had seized on, and it had taken off with the brakes on and got really hot. So they had to leave the landing gear down so it would cool down. But when it landed, they were worse than when it took off. And so we had like fire engines and that chasing down the runway afterwards. And for me, that was really exciting. I know Dan would probably have loved that. But being someone who doesn't like flying. But so if you like flying, the holiday begins the moment you board the aeroplane. Is there music playing somewhere? Oh yes, thank you for the entertainment, Kayla. And now, if you don't like flying, then you'll board the aeroplane because it's worth it, isn't it? It's worth it for the place that you're going to. Now, if we think about life as a journey, okay, well, if you like the journey, then it's good, isn't it? And sometimes we talked about this a bit on Sunday. I know there's a little bit of overlap because not everyone was here on Sunday, by the way. But if life is a journey and you have a good journey and you enjoy the journey, then that's part of the whole thing, isn't it? And we can enjoy the journey of life. But why do we go on the journey? For the destination where we're getting to. Now, if you believe, and this is why this evening and the next 3 evenings are so important. If you believe that this life ends in death, if that's what you believe, and then that's it, there's nothing beyond, if that's what you believe, then that means that this journey is your everything. This is it. This is your moment in time. You step onto the stage of life just for a little glimpse of, in the grand scheme of things, and you're going to disappear again very quickly. And this is it, the journey. So if you're like that person that hates aeroplanes, then it's like you have to ask, what's it about? I'm not enjoying the journey, and I don't believe there's anywhere to go to particularly. And so that's a harsh thing, isn't it? But so what we believe about what happens at the end of the journey is arguably the most important question in life. Because if you believe, like when you go on a holiday to the place in the sun, there's somewhere glorious, somewhere wonderful at the end of it, then that makes this life very different. Our perspective on life is very different. How you view the end has a massive effect on the way you live and the reason that you live. And so what we're considering this evening can be life-changing because it can determine your whole outlook and view of life. Jade, can you just jog the thing so that it's not being a distraction? So if you believe death is what awaits us and then that's it, then you'll have one view of life. If you believe there's something beyond death, then that changes the way that we view life. Now, I said earlier, didn't I, that this evening what we're going to do is locate ourselves, as it were, on the map of life. And each of us will be in a slightly different place. But in order to locate ourselves on that map, we have to be, the really important thing to do is to be honest. So if you're back in the city and you're looking at the map and you can't see a sign "you are here," you might think, well, I like it there, so I'm going to say that I'm there. Well, if you're not there, it's no good, is it? If you say you're somewhere on the map where you're not really, but you say it just because you like that particular idea, then what will happen is if you say I'm there and I want to get there, you'll plot your way and you won't get to where you want to get to. Is that right? And so it's important to acknowledge where we are really at. And so as we reflect this evening on life, we'll be thinking about some really good, really joyful and exciting things, but we're also going to be confronting some of the harsh realities as well, so that we're not kidding ourselves. We're just going to be honest this evening. And we begin by thinking about hope. Every single one of us have our lives right now, this applies to every one of us, filled with all kinds of hopes. Every one of us will have them. And they're really important. In fact, the way that we're made, it's like we're hardwired to hope. We're so sort of bent on hope that if we can't see any, we put hope in the possibility that there might be some hope. You know, when everything looks black and you can't see a way forward, your hope is that something will turn up. So your hope sometimes is just in hope and nothing actually tangible. But most of us have got all sorts of things. We are hopelessly hopeful creatures, all of us. And there are all kinds of hopes that we have. So some of us will have little small hopes, lots of them, and some of us have big hopes. And some of us have a mixture of both. Now, here is why hope is such an essential thing for us, okay? There's a quote, if you can show the first quote, Jade. Now, I can't say the guy's name. It's something like this. Thich Nhat Hanh, okay? But he is a Vietnamese Buddhist. And he said this: hope is important because it can make the present moment less difficult to bear. If we believe that tomorrow will be better, we can bear a hardship today. That's true, isn't it? You think about that. For as long as we think that there's something coming, then we can endure whatever hardships that we're going through. And that is why hope is so important. But there are two important points I want to make about hope, and then we're going to think about what some of those hopes are. The first thing to say about the hopes that we will have is we very rarely stop and think about them. We very rarely stop and think about what motivates us, what makes us tick. And so we don't assess if these are things that we really want to be motivating us. That's the first thing. The second reason, or the second thing says, we don't think about hope or the validity of our hopes very often because they work for us functionally. Now, what I mean by that is this: whatever hope we've got for tomorrow helps us cope with life today. And for as long as it's doing that, we'll put our hope in it, for a better day tomorrow. And it just helps us cope. And because it's actually working for us, helping us get through each day, we tend not to think about it too much. But let's think for a moment about what some of those common hopes are, and then we'll assess their real usefulness for life, okay? And many of them are very good. So, for example, here's some hopes I hope we can all relate to. We all start life as children, right? And what does every child look forward to? Being grown up, don't they? Every child. When you was a child, you couldn't wait to be grown up. Why? Because you had hopes. Your hope was, when you're grown up, no one's going to tell you what to do anymore, right? I can do whatever I like when I'm grown up, and mum and dad or the school teacher or whatever, they can't tell me what to do anymore. All of us probably thought like that, didn't we? When you was young, you thought life is going to be better when I'm older, when I'm grown up. Okay? Here's another one again. As a child, Perhaps you look forward to being grown up because you would have your own money. And you're just fed up with your mum and dad saying, sorry, I haven't got any money, when you knew that they've got like £35 in their purse. It's true, isn't it? So you've got loads of money in your wallet. Of course you can. If I had that money, and you think as a child how you'd use that money, so you look forward to being older because then you're going to have all the money. And you're not going to waste it on paying bills. You're going to do some fun things with it. My little nephew, this is how he had no idea of the reality of money. His mum, at the time, she was a single mum. And we went on a coach trip somewhere, and I was chatting with him with my brother. And I think he was about 4 or 5 years old. We said, what do you want to do when you're older, Connor? He said, oh, I want to play PlayStation. We said, yeah, well, you've got to do something more than that. He said, no, I just want to play on the PlayStation. I said, well, what are you going to do about money? He said, I'll just do what my mum does. I'll just go down to the hole in the wall and get some money out. That's what he imagined his hopes were. Well, he's an adult now. What do you think those hopes has happened to those hopes now? Those hopes that kept him going and gave him hope when he was a nipper. Well, here's another hope that many of us will have had. We'll have been thinking, if I can just pass my driving test, that then my life is going to be better. And so maybe you didn't have much money, you couldn't really afford the lessons, but you made the sacrifice because when you get a car and you're on the road, your life's going to be dandy, right? And so that helps us cope with things. Anyone that's married will have hoped that the girl they asked to marry them was going to say yes. And, during that time there's that, if she says yes, oh, my life's going to be so much better. Well, I wonder how that worked out for you. For me, it worked out great. But it's true, isn't it? We have really think that, once I'm married, it's going to be great. And there's lots of great things, but it's generally not quite how we imagined, is it? Having children, England doing well in the European Cup. How many had that hope? Well, we all know how that went, don't we? Sadly. Now, there are some of the sort of bigger hopes and naive hopes that we have, but right now, you all have hopes at this moment in time. And, the small ones will be things like this, something that you're hoping to get. Maybe you're planning at the moment, you're thinking, you've been talking with whoever, your spouse or friends or whatever, about this thing that you're going to get, okay? Anyone got something on their mind that they're planning on getting at some point fairly soon? Yeah? Sorry? Pay rise, right, so that's giving you some hope right now, right? We've all got things, whether it's a gadget or a bit of furniture or a bit of decorating or whatever, various things that we're thinking, when I get that, and we're looking forward to it, and it is giving us hope now. And it's like we've got lots of these hopes, and we just go, and once that hope is fulfilled, we engage with what I've called, and you need to remember this, the honeymoon period of hope, okay? What do I mean by that? Well, think about when you first pass your driving test. First, there's the hope of it, right? And then you pass your test and you have a little few moments, really, of euphoria, yeah? It's really joyful. And there's the honeymoon period where now you got your freedom, okay? But the honeymoon never lasts very long, does it? And so after a while, you find yourself sitting in traffic, hating driving. That's me now anyway, if I'm on a car. It's horrible, isn't it? Sitting in traffic, like seeing motorcyclists go past and cyclists and everything else. And the joy of it doesn't last forever, does it? And something that we thought was going to really change our lives. Well, it does change our lives, but here's what it doesn't really do. It doesn't make our lives better, does it, if we're honest? It might make things easier, but as soon as that hope's fulfilled and the honeymoon period's over, what are we doing? We're fixing our hopes on something else, hoping that something else is going to come up. And when we're not doing that, as I said here, we're hoping on hope. We're hoping that somewhere along the line, my life is going to change and get better. We just hope it will.
We hope it's not just going to stay the same most of the time. So we are tenaciously hopeful. We keep on with this thing called hope, every single one of us. And we would find it very difficult to live without it. But it is important to just think about those hopes, because very often the very things that keep us going and give us hope rob us and deceive us. Here's what I mean. Can we have the carrot and the donkey picture? Hope is often like that. You know that image? You know what it means? It's where you tie a carrot in front of a donkey and it chases after it forever but never gets it. You see, the things that we put our hope in, it's not the things that we really want, and it's what that thing is going to give us. We're hoping it's going to make the difference in our lives. But time and time and time again, it turns out to be the carrot in front of the donkey's nose. And so if you think about all those hopes that you've got right now, the things that you're looking forward to, the new carpet, the new car, the gadget, the new job, whatever it might be, all those things that we set our hope on, I would argue, usually turn out to be a carrot on the end of the stick that's been dangling in front of our nose, if we're honest. Now, that's not to say that those things are bad, because they're really good. Marriage is a great thing. And passing your driver test, it is something to celebrate and be pleased about. All these things are very good. The problem is they're just not what we hoped they were going to be. They never turn out to be what we thought they would be. So that new job we was really excited about, 6 months later, it's a bit of a grind, usually. But the new car, when we finally get it, after a few months, it's like, gets a bit ordinary, doesn't it? And you can apply that to just about everything. So if you think about Johnny, I thought I'd illustrate this with I should have chosen a different name because we've got Johnny in the room. I'm not talking about you. Johnny doesn't drive and he's not taking driving lessons, okay? Not at the moment. So this isn't you, Johnny. But take Johnny. John had a bit of a rubbish life at home and he was looking forward to growing up because as soon as he left home, life was going to get better. Well, Johnny did grow up and he did leave home and he managed to get a job working in a call centre. And in this call centre, like many of them are, you're in cubicles, so you can't talk to the person next to you. It's totally antisocial. Someone breathing over his shoulder all the time, making sure he's getting on with his job. He was paid on minimum wage, but with commission. And so he couldn't relax. He had to do everything that he could to earn a buck. And his life wasn't really any better. In fact, it was tedious. And he's having to work all the hours. But his hope was, well, if I can save up the money for some lessons, I can get a car and I can get a better job. Well, he saves up for the money, gets some lessons, fails his first test. He thinks, oh, well, I can't really afford it, but I'll keep paying it. Hopefully I'll pass the second time. Most people do. All the best drivers do, by the way. And he passes the second time. And he thinks, great. But the problem is, he can afford a little chitty bang bang, but he can't afford any insurance. And so he thinks, oh no, I can't drive yet. I've got my licence though. I'll carry on working here. When I'm a bit older, my insurance will come down. Then I can get a decent car. Then I can start driving. Well, he gets himself a decent car. He ends up getting married. His marriage breaks up. He gets remarried. Blah, blah, blah. And his life goes on. And here's the thing, okay? I don't know if you notice this. This is how often we live our lives. We're continually trusting in something that's not delivering. And so we can squander. This is what we're doing very often. We squander in our lives, thinking that this is it. And then we get to the other end and we look back and we think, how I've missed something. A great man called Jonathan Edwards, not the triple jumper, the guy that he was named after actually. On his 18th birthday, he determined that he would never look back and regret. Anything that he thought he might look back and regret, he decided he was going to do in the first place. Does that make sense? Did I articulate that right, yeah? And there's a lot of wisdom in that. So So we're full of hopes, and those hopes have a honeymoon period, but they invariably don't deliver. So what are you hoping for at the moment? What are your hopes? What is it that you want? What is it that you're planning for at the moment that you think is going to make your life better? Now, I would say the reality is this: the best thing that most of us can hope for is that we don't live lives where we end up with no one and nothing. That would be a terrible thing, wouldn't it? Ending up, as some people do, with nothing and no one. That's the way that some people end up. We all need people. The best that most of us hope for is a reasonably happy marriage, that if we have children, that they marry well. Anyone that's got kids that are getting a bit older like I have, you want them to marry well. You don't want them to marry some thug. Yeah. And for a bit of security. Okay, they're the things that most people are really banking on in life. If my children can marry well, and if I can have a bit of security and I can make my marriage work, then that's as much as we can hope for. Now, here's what I would say about that. The thing about marriage, particularly, is it's a cruel thing. The best of marriages are cruel things in one way. If you compare a marriage partnership to a parental partnership with your children, there's a major difference between the two. They both involve a lot of love, okay? But with a child starts off in its mother's womb. It can't be any closer to the mother than within her body, right? And then the child gets born and the child is outside of the mother's womb, but the bond is very, very strong, isn't it? Usually, normally. But then as the child grows, what happens is they become a bit more independent and more independent. And they get to an age where they don't really want hugs and they don't want to rough and tumble anymore. And then they get older, and what do they end up doing? They end up falling in love with some guy, if they're a girl, and he's never good enough. Or, no, he is Jade, and so actually you're the only one here that I need to worry about. But they end up falling in love with someone else, they marry them, they move away, and the distance from conception to adulthood is one of growing further and further apart. So the relationship thins out. With marriage, usually the person that you marry, you never knew them when you was younger. You didn't know they existed. And then one day, probably between the ages of 15 and 35, 40 or whatever, 50 in my uncle's case, even older than that in George's dad's case, at some point you see someone across the room or whatever, they catch your eye, and you don't know anything about them, but you like them, and then you start to get to know them, and the difference is this: the relationship gets closer and closer, the complete opposite to the relationship with children, until you get married, and then it gets closer still. And so that hopefully a good marriage, people grow in love. Now apparently 50s are unhappy. That's terrible, isn't it? That doesn't leave many good marriages left. So hopefully, those of you that are married will have good marriages. But for those marriages that do really well, you think about it, they've gone on a journey growing in love together, and then it ends in death. And that's what I mean by marriage is in some ways the cruelest of things. Because the more successful the marriage, the more devastating the end of it becomes. If you get two pieces of card and glue them together and let them dry properly, and then you try and tear them apart, you destroy both pieces. And that's what happens. So that, you see an old couple, you see them sometimes down the beach, there they are hand in hand, and we think, isn't that lovely? Isn't that sweet? I hope I have a marriage like that. You see them when one of them goes. The devastation. It is awful. It's such a terrible way for a marriage to end. And so the best that we can hope for, sadly, ends tragically. And in light of that, usually, we hope that we don't live too long after our spouse. That's pretty sad. That is a sad state of affairs. As I said, we're thinking about the highs and the lows, but that is the sad truth. I want to sum this talk up, and then we're going to go to the discussion with a very powerful quote from a man called Mark Twain. Okay, then we're going to think about this quote and some other quotes, and we've got some questions to talk about. But think about what he says. He says, "A multitude of men are born. They labour and sweat and struggle." Okay, now, by the way, as I read this, just think, as I sort of pause, clock within your own mind, do I agree with that? Is that true? Okay, so see if you can track with me. So I'll start again. "A multitude of men are born," well, we can all agree with that, and women. "They labour and sweat and struggle. They squabble and scold and fight and scramble for what little advantages they can get over each other. Age creeps in upon them. Sickness and weakness follow. Those they love are taken from them. And the joy of life is turned to aching grief. It, death, comes at last, the only unpoisoned gift earth ever had for them. And they vanish from a world where they were of no consequence, a world which will lament them a day and forget them forever." I mean, the sad thing is that is true. A couple of generations' time, we may as well have not lived in the eyes of everyone else that's going to be living. It's a terrible reality, isn't it? But on this piece of paper, there's the top one is the Mark Twain quote. The other one is a number of other quotes, which are all happy quotes, okay? So we've got some happy quotes to think about as well. But you get the power of what Mark Twain is saying there, don't you? If it all ends in death, and if we face up to that, then this becomes reality. And I would suggest it's because of that reality that most of us don't like to think about those things. But remember, we are locating ourselves on the map of life. And so we need to face up to those things, to think again about, well, where do I want my life to be going? So that brings us to the end of this part. So what I'll do is I'll give you